He inherited a farm, but then found out who was trying to take it back. When 19-year-old Tyler takes custody of his younger siblings to escape years of abuse, it feels like their lives might finally turn around. But just as hope starts to return, an unexpected inheritance and a dangerous twist from the past threaten to destroy everything they've rebuilt. Secrets, betrayal, and a fight for a future no one saw coming. Watch until the end for a story of survival, family, and the power of breaking cycles, no matter where you come from. You ever get that feeling like you were born in the wrong house? Like the family you ended up with somehow isn't the one you were supposed to belong to? That was me, every single day growing up. My name's Tyler, and I grew up in a rundown town in Indiana where the only exciting thing that ever happened was when the grocery store got new carts with wheels that actually worked. Our house was 2 bedrooms, 6 people, and 0 peace. And before you ask, yeah, it was as chaotic as it sounds. Me, my 2 sisters, my younger brother, and our parents all crammed into a place that should have been condemned 10 years earlier. The front door didn't close right, the living room ceiling had a crack big enough to whisper secrets through, and the hot water had a bad habit of giving up right in the middle of winter. But hey, at least the rats seemed happy. Dad worked off and on at the mill, but mostly off. When he wasn't working, he was sitting in his recliner drinking the cheapest beer he could find, yelling at the TV like it owed him money. Mom held things together best she could, cleaning houses for folks who lived in the part of town with sidewalks, driveways, and Christmas lights that actually lit up. But here's the thing, as bad as it was, we didn't complain. Not because we were grateful. It was more like we just didn't have the energy. When you spend every day trying to stretch a box of cereal across 4 kids, you stop dreaming about better days. You just survive. That's what we did. Until the day everything changed. I was 17 when I found the letter. It was in a shoebox in the attic, wedged between old school yearbooks and a broken lamp. The box had my name on it and Mom's handwriting, but I knew better than to go snooping. Still, something about it pulled me in. Inside was a letter dated 10 years earlier. The first few lines hit me like a brick. Dear Tyler, if you're reading this, then the truth has finally found you. I've wanted to tell you everything for years, but I was too afraid. You deserve to know the truth about who you really are. That's where my hands started shaking. The letter went on to explain that I wasn't my dad's biological son. In fact, my real father had lived just 2 towns over and had no idea I even existed. My mom had been with him before she met the man I called Dad, but when she found out she was pregnant, she panicked. She married the first guy who offered to fix her situation, which apparently meant turning her life into a slow-burn tragedy. I don't know how long I sat there in the attic, just staring at those words. The walls suddenly felt smaller. The dust in the air made it hard to breathe. Everything I thought I knew about myself, about our family, cracked wide open. I didn't tell anyone about the letter right away. I hid it under my mattress and tried to pretend like things were normal. But once you know something like that, it changes the way you see everything. The way my dad looked at me with those cold eyes. The way Mom would flinch when he raised his voice. The way I always felt like an outsider, even in my own home. Then the fight started getting worse. Not just the usual yelling, this time there was real rage. My dad lost his job again, and that set off a chain reaction. Mom got sick, some kind of infection she ignored for too long because we didn't have insurance. She ended up in the hospital, and we had no way to pay for it. The bills piled up, and my dad started blaming all of us. He'd shout that we were the reason his life was miserable, that he could have been somebody if he didn't have to drag us all around like anchors. My little brother, Evan, started sleeping under the bed just to avoid the noise. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know more. So one night, after everyone was asleep, I took the bus to the next town over. The return address on the letter was still there. I didn't even know if the guy still lived there, or if he ever did. But I had nothing to lose. The house was small but clean. A red pickup in the driveway. I sat across the street for over an hour, trying to figure out what I'd even say if someone opened the door. Finally, I worked up the nerve and walked up the steps. A man answered. He looked to be in his early 40s, gray at the temples but strong, like someone who'd spent his life building things. I could see my own face in his features, which just about knocked the wind out of me. Can I help you? He asked, friendly but cautious. I think you might be my dad. He stared at me like I'd just spoken another language. What did you say? I handed him the letter. He took it, glanced down, and I saw his hands start to shake too. He read the whole thing right there on the porch, then looked up at me with the kind of expression I'll never forget, equal parts disbelief, sorrow, and something like hope. I never knew, he whispered. Neither of us really knew what to say after that, so he invited me in. We talked for hours. His name was Daniel. He'd never had kids, never married. He said he always wondered what had happened to my mom after they split, but she vanished. No calls, no letters. And now here I was. He didn't try to hug me or make any grand gestures. He just made me a sandwich, handed me a Coke, and said, I don't know what you've been through, but you're not alone anymore. I didn't go back home that night. Daniel let me sleep on his couch. He didn't ask a bunch of questions or try to pry into what had happened. He just gave me a blanket, set a glass of water on the coffee table, and said, we'll figure it out in the morning. And for the first time in a long while, I felt safe. Like truly safe. No yelling. No slamming doors. No walking on eggshells. I stared at the ceiling for a while, trying to make sense of it all. Everything had changed, but somehow, It felt like I was finally starting to see things clearly. When I got back the next day, the house was a mess. Trash everywhere. My dad was passed out on the couch, and Mom was still at the hospital. My sisters were trying to make spaghetti with a half-empty jar of sauce and stale noodles. Evan was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your stomach twist. No one asked where I'd been. They just looked at me like I was a ghost. I went straight to my room and locked the door. I pulled out the letter again, thinking maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. But it was still there. Still real. Over the next week, I started visiting Daniel more often. At first, it was just for a few hours. Then I started staying overnight. He showed me photos from his younger days, told me stories about working on cars, and even let me help out at the local shop he managed. The guy was rough around the edges, but honest. Real. I didn't tell him everything right away. I couldn't. How do you explain that the man you grew up calling Dad was the kind of guy who broke things just to feel powerful? That your mom had been stuck for years, too scared to leave, too broke to try? But little by little, it all came out. One night, I told him about how my dad once threw a chair across the room because I spilled a glass of milk. Another night, I told him about how Mom used to cry herself to sleep when she thought we couldn't hear. Every story made him go quiet. Finally, he said, "You don't have to go back there, you know. Not if you don't want to." I wish it were that simple. Because as much as I hated being in that house, I couldn't just walk away. My siblings, especially Evan, needed someone. Someone who wasn't broken yet. Someone who could protect them. So I made a plan. I'd keep visiting Daniel, keep working with him at the shop, and save up every dime I could. Maybe I couldn't fix everything, but I could get Evan out of there. Maybe even the girls too, if I played it smart. And for a while, the plan seemed to be working. But life doesn't wait for perfect timing. It all came crashing down on a Wednesday night. I was in the garage helping Daniel change out a transmission when my phone rang. It was my sister, Hannah. Her voice was shaking. "Tyler, you need to come home. Now." I didn't even ask why. I just grabbed my backpack, jumped in Daniel's truck, and we sped the whole way there. When we got to the house, the front door was wide open. There was shattered glass on the porch and yelling coming from inside. My dad's voice was booming, angrier than I'd ever heard it. I rushed in and found him standing over Evan, who was curled up in the corner, crying. I don't remember thinking. I just acted. I stepped between them and told him to back off. He shoved me. I shoved him back. Then he lunged and I swung. My fist landed square on his jaw, and he stumbled back, stunned. That moment felt like it lasted forever. Daniel came in right behind me and pulled him away. "You lay a hand on any of them again, and I'll make sure you never see daylight," he growled. My dad tried to come back at him, but Daniel wasn't the same kind of man. He didn't shout to be scary. He didn't puff out his chest. He just stood there, calm and steady, and my dad backed down. Cops showed up about 10 minutes later. Hannah had called them. My dad got arrested on the spot for assault and endangerment. It wasn't his first run-in with the law, but this time it stuck. Child services came the next day. And just like that, the family we'd been pretending to be was gone. They placed Evan and the girls in temporary foster care, but I couldn't let it end there. I was 18 by then, barely old enough to legally do anything, but I stepped forward anyway. I told them I wanted custody, that I had a job, a safe place to stay, and a father, Daniel, who was ready to help. It took months of paperwork, interviews, and home inspections. But we made it. Daniel opened up his house to all of us. He added bunk beds to the spare room, made a chore chart, even started cooking dinner every night like it was the most normal thing in the world. And maybe it was. For the first time, we were starting to feel what normal could be. Mom came back eventually. She was healthier, clearer. She'd left the hospital and gone to stay with a distant cousin while she figured things out. She didn't fight me on the custody stuff. She said, "You're doing what I couldn't. Don't stop." I still visit her. We talk more now than we ever did before. There's pain in her eyes, but also relief. The strangest part is, despite everything, I don't hate my dad. I used to. But now, I mostly just feel sad for him. For the life he could have lived, for the people he pushed away. We haven't spoken since the night he was arrested, and I don't know if we ever will. But that's not my burden to carry anymore. We built something new now. Not perfect, but real. It's wild how quickly you can get used to peace when you've lived in chaos your whole life. The first few weeks living with Daniel felt almost surreal. The house was small, but it was clean, quiet, and full of little things I'd never realized I craved, like warm meals, working heat, and someone asking how your day was without a hidden agenda. Daniel didn't try to be our replacement dad. He knew better than to pretend the past hadn't happened. Instead, he became something else, steady, dependable, and honest. He showed up for school meetings, helped with homework, and made us laugh with stories about old muscle cars and near misses from his youth. Evan started sleeping through the night again. My sisters, Hannah and Lacey, stopped flinching at every raised voice. I got promoted at the shop, and even started thinking about community college. For the first time in years, we could breathe. But just when I thought we were finally catching a break, the past found a way to sneak back in. It started with a phone call. Daniel was in the kitchen making his famous chili, well, famous in our house at least, when the landline rang. He answered with his usual gruff, "Hello," but his tone shifted quick. He turned to me, "I'm serious. It's for you." I took the phone, confused. "Hello, Tyler? This is Lisa. I'm your aunt, your father's sister." At first, I didn't know what to say. I barely even knew she existed. I vaguely remembered a tall woman at a few family gatherings when I was younger, but we hadn't heard from her in years. I need to talk to you. It's important, she said. Can we meet? I hesitated, but curiosity got the best of me. We agreed to meet the next day at a small diner just outside town. She was already sitting at a booth when I arrived, wearing a dark blazer and tapping nervously on the table. When she saw me, she stood up, gave a tight smile, and motioned for me to sit. You look just like your mom, she said, trying to sound casual. We made small talk for a few minutes before she finally got to the point. Your grandfather passed away 2 months ago. He left behind a property, a farmhouse with some land. The will's been in probate, but here's the thing. He left it to you. I blinked. Me? Why? She looked down. Because he didn't trust your father. None of us did. And after what happened, I guess he figured you were the only one who might do something good with it. I didn't know what to say. I barely knew the man. We hadn't visited the farm in over a decade. And yet, suddenly I was being handed property we could never afford in a million years. There's just one problem, she said carefully. Your dad is contesting the will. Of course he was. He's claiming the whole thing is fraudulent. Says you manipulated our father while he was sick. That you took advantage of him. I almost laughed. I hadn't even known my grandfather was still alive, let alone left me something. But this wasn't funny. If my dad won in court, he'd get everything. And I knew exactly what he'd do with it. Sell it for quick cash and blow through it in months. I thanked her for telling me and left the diner with my mind racing. That property could change everything. We could fix it up, live there, maybe even turn part of it into a small business or rent the land. It was more than just land. It was a shot at real stability. When I told Daniel, he nodded slowly. We'll fight it, he said. You're not alone in this. We got a lawyer. I gathered every piece of evidence I could find, letters, family photos, anything that showed I hadn't even been in contact with my grandfather at the time the will was written. Lisa testified on my behalf. So did Mom. She showed up, sat in that courtroom with a strength I didn't know she still had, and told the truth. My dad didn't show up in person, just sent his lawyer. But the things that lawyer said about me? You'd think I was some kind of mastermind thief. Said I was manipulating everyone, using my sob story to gain sympathy, that I was just a selfish kid trying to take what wasn't mine. I kept my head down, but inside I was burning. The court date came and went, and for weeks we heard nothing. Life went on in limbo. We tried not to talk about it, but it hung in the air like a storm cloud waiting to crack open. Then one Thursday afternoon, the letter arrived. I opened it on the porch, with Evan sitting next to me eating a popsicle. You okay? He asked, seeing my hands shake. I nodded, opened the envelope, and read the words I'd been afraid to see. The court finds in favor of the respondent, Tyler James. The will is upheld. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. We won. By the weekend, we were driving out to see the place. It was about an hour from town, down a gravel road lined with oaks and old mailboxes. The farmhouse looked like it had come straight out of a movie, white paint peeling, shutters hanging crooked, but full of potential. The fields behind it rolled out like something from a postcard. Evan ran through the tall grass like it was an amusement park. Hannah started sketching designs for her dream room. Daniel stood beside me and said, you know, with a little elbow grease, this place could really be something. And I believed him. For once, we had a future that wasn't just about surviving. We had space. We had dreams. And we had each other. We moved into the farmhouse 2 weeks after the court decision. The house needed work, badly, but we didn't care. Peeling paint, creaky floors, a roof that leaked in one corner of the kitchen. It was still ours. Every board, every nail, every drafty window belonged to us now. Daniel helped organize everything. He called in a few buddies from the shop who knew their way around plumbing and wiring. We couldn't afford professionals, but with a little sweat and a lot of YouTube tutorials, we made it work. Slowly, the house started to feel alive again. Evan picked the attic bedroom. Said it felt like a treehouse. Hannah and Lacey shared the biggest room upstairs and painted it a pale blue. I slept in the old master bedroom, where the light came in through a cracked window and landed just right on the wooden floor in the mornings. We cleaned the place out room by room. Found old books, dusty furniture, even a few boxes of faded family photos. Most of the people in them were strangers to us. Still, we kept the ones that felt important, put them in a shoebox under the coffee table like some kind of quiet tribute to the family that came before. One afternoon, I decided to tackle the barn. It sat about 50 yards behind the house, half sunk in overgrown grass. The doors groaned like they hadn't been opened in years. Dust swirled up as I stepped inside, and the smell of old hay and rust hit me like a wave. Inside, it was like a time capsule. There were tools hanging on the walls, jars full of screws and bolts, and an old tractor under a tarp in the corner. But what caught my eye was the small wooden chest buried under a tarp behind some crates. It wasn't locked, just latched shut with a piece of frayed rope. I knelt down and opened it. Inside were stacks of letters. Dozens of them, all in the same handwriting. At first, I thought they were just old bills or receipts. But when I pulled one out and unfolded it, my heart nearly stopped. To my son, Tyler, I'm sorry I never got to know you. I've written you a letter every month since I found out you existed. I don't know if you'll ever read these. I don't even know if they'll make it to you. But I had to try. I sat there for hours, reading them one by one. They were all from my grandfather. He had known, not just about me, but about everything. Somehow, he'd found out the truth, that my dad wasn't my real father, that Daniel was. One letter said he'd confronted my mom years ago, begged her to leave my dad and tell me the truth. She refused, scared of what might happen. And then, the letters kept coming, month after month. He never stopped writing, even when no one answered. He talked about the farm, about growing old, about his regrets. He said he tried reaching out to Daniel once, but didn't know if it ever got through. The last letter was dated only a few months before he died. If you're reading this, then you made it. And I hope that means something good. I never stopped hoping you'd come home. I don't think I've ever cried like that in my life. Not out of sadness, exactly. It was something deeper. Something in my bones finally letting go of a weight I didn't even know I'd been carrying. I brought the letters inside and showed Daniel. He read them slowly, silently. When he finished, he just nodded and said, he was trying to do right by you, even when no one else did. That night, I sat my siblings down and told them what I'd found. We talked for hours about family, forgiveness, and what it really means to start over. Evan said he wanted to build a garden in Grandpa's name. Hannah decided she'd write an article about it for the school paper. Lacey just said, I'm glad he tried. That matters. In the months that followed, things really started to settle. The farm became our safe place. We planted a vegetable patch, painted the barn, even hosted a few neighborhood kids for a summer bonfire. Daniel taught us how to change oil and rotate tires, and I finally enrolled in community college part-time. Mom came to visit more often. She still had her struggles, but she was healing in her own way. She apologized one day, not for everything, but for the silence. For not telling me sooner. I didn't have the heart to stay angry. Not anymore. But just when it felt like we were finally free from the past, something else came up. One morning, I got a letter in the mailbox. No return address. Just my name on the front in shaky handwriting. Inside was a single photograph. It was of my dad, my legal dad, standing in front of a pawn shop in another state. Dated just a few weeks earlier. On the back, someone had written, he's looking for you. Be careful. I stared at that photo for a long time. My first instinct was denial. Maybe it wasn't recent. Maybe it was old. Maybe someone was messing with me. But the date scrawled on the back, clear as day, said it wasn't some dusty memory. It was fresh, just a few weeks ago. And that look on his face, it chilled me. Not because he looked angry or sad, but because he looked the same. Like nothing had changed. I didn't tell Daniel or the kids right away. I didn't want to scare them unless I had to. But I couldn't ignore it either. So I drove to the local library the next day and logged onto one of their public computers. I searched the name of the pawn shop printed on the storefront in the photo. It was in Ohio, 2 towns over from where we used to live. Not far. Too close, really. Then I called Lisa, my aunt, the one who'd helped with the inheritance. She picked up after the third ring. Tyler, everything okay? I explained what I'd found. The photo, the handwriting, the warning. She sighed deeply. He reached out to me, about a month ago. Wanted to patch things up, whatever that means. I didn't respond. I asked her if she knew who might have sent the photo. She paused. Maybe someone from his circle. Old drinking buddies. Maybe even someone who felt bad for what he did to you. He's not exactly discreet, She offered to dig around and let me know if she heard anything else. I thanked her and hung up, but my gut told me this wasn't random. Whoever sent that photo, they wanted me to know something. And that meant they were watching. That night, I finally told Daniel. He didn't panic, didn't overreact. He just nodded, set down his coffee, and said, then we stay alert. And we don't let fear run this place. We took precautions. Cameras. Stronger locks. I even had a buddy from the shop help me reinforce the back barn door, just in case. But even with all that, the feeling of being watched didn't go away. The next twist came from the unlikeliest place. Evan. One morning, he came running inside holding something in his hand. Tyler, I found this stuck to the mailbox. It was an envelope. No stamp. Just taped there. Inside, another photo, this time of our house. Taken from the woods behind the barn. And a note. You took what was mine. I'm not done with you yet. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just paranoia. He was back, and he was close. We called the sheriff. Filed a report. But with no proof of who actually left the note, there wasn't much they could do. Keep an eye out, the deputy said. Let us know if you see anything suspicious. Not exactly comforting. I slept maybe 3 hours that night. Every creak, every gust of wind, every distant sound had me jumping to the window. Daniel stayed up too, sitting on the porch with his old hunting flashlight and a thermos of coffee, like a silent sentry. The next day, I decided to go through the rest of the barn, every inch of it. If he'd been on the property, maybe he'd left something else behind. I didn't expect what I found. Behind a false panel in the back wall, tucked into a hollow space, was a small metal box. Inside were old photos, receipts, and a notebook wrapped in plastic. The photos were of my dad, my legal one, taken years ago, at bars, outside of stores, even one of them arguing with my mom in the front yard. But the notebook was something else entirely. It belonged to my grandfather. Each page was written in small, cramped handwriting. And the more I read, the more my stomach turned. He'd hired a private investigator. He'd spent years gathering evidence of the abuse happening in our house. Photos, testimonies from neighbors, even a copy of a police report from when I was 12 that I didn't even know existed. He'd tried to build a case to get us out. Tried to take custody himself. But every attempt was blocked. Apparently, my dad had threatened him. More than once. There were notes about mysterious car trouble and someone cutting the phone line. Eventually, my grandfather gave up going through the courts and started documenting everything instead, hoping that one day I'd find it. The last few pages were the worst. One line stood out, underlined twice. If anything happens to me, check the well. I sat back, cold all over. We didn't have a well anymore. It had been sealed off years ago, but I knew exactly where it was. The circular stone lid behind the barn, half covered in ivy. Daniel helped me pry it open the next morning. There was no body, no bones, no big dramatic reveal. But there was something. At the very bottom of the old well, we found a metal lockbox wrapped in a tarp. It had been dropped down with a rope, long since rotted. Took us an hour and a claw tool to get it out. Inside, money, documents, copies of letters, including some to the police. One labeled, to be opened in the event of my death. My grandfather had prepared for everything. He'd tried, in his own way, to protect us, even if no one listened at the time. That discovery changed the entire narrative. I brought it all to the sheriff. This time, they listened. With the new evidence, they reopened a case. Suddenly, my dad wasn't just some bitter ex with a grudge. He was a potential suspect in multiple threats, past abuse, and possibly even interference with my grandfather's original attempts to protect us. The sheriff assigned a deputy to monitor the area. And finally, we felt like someone believed us. I still don't know who left those photos, but I have a feeling it was someone close to my dad, someone who finally saw enough to switch sides. There's an investigation now. Quiet, but real. And while we're not out of the woods yet, I'm no longer afraid. Because we're not hiding anymore. Not running. Not pretending. This farm, this family, we've fought to rebuild it, brick by brick. And no matter what comes next, we're standing our ground. Weeks passed, and the investigation picked up steam. Deputies came around more often, asking questions, collecting statements. They took the contents of the lockbox and sent copies to the county office. A detective showed up one morning with a badge clipped to his belt and a small notepad in his hand. He sat with me and Daniel on the porch, flipping through documents like he already knew what he was looking for. Your grandfather was persistent, he said, tapping a page. He kept records better than half our department. That should have made me feel better. But it didn't. Because the more they uncovered, the more it became clear there were people who looked the other way. Social workers, school officials, maybe even a cop or two. My dad had friends in low places. He'd gotten away with too much for too long. And now, he was running out of shadows to hide in. One afternoon, the sheriff called me down to the station. We got something, he said. You might want to sit down. They'd recovered security footage from a gas station about 30 miles away, dated just a few days before that photo of our house showed up. Clear as day, there was my dad, standing by the payphone. And right next to him, a face I never expected to see again. My mom. My stomach dropped. They paused the tape, zoomed in. She was thinner, looked tired, but it was definitely her. Her arm was hooked through his, like old times. And she was smiling. You sure that's your mom? The sheriff asked. I nodded, slowly. Yeah, that's her. After everything, she went back to him. I felt like the floor had been yanked out from under me. All the visits. All the apologies. The tears. The thank you for saving them speeches. I believed it all. But now? I didn't know what to believe. The sheriff leaned forward. We don't know the full story yet. Could be she was forced. Could be something else. But we thought you should know. I drove home in silence. Daniel was working on the back fence when I pulled up. I didn't even wait for him to ask. I just handed him the still image the sheriff gave me and said, she was with him. He didn't react right away. Just stared at the photo. Finally, he handed it back and said, well, now we know. The kids took it harder. Evan didn't say anything for 2 days. Hannah kept asking if it was real, if maybe it was photoshopped or someone that just looked like her. Lacey cried in her room and wouldn't come out for dinner. I didn't have answers. Only questions that made my chest tighten. Had she ever really left him? Or was this some long game? Had she known about the inheritance? The letters? The farmhouse? And worst of all, was she the one who sent those photos to warn me or to scare me? We'd come too far to fall apart now. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I stayed busy. We finished the fence, repainted the shed, started building raised garden beds. Evan dug a little corner behind the barn and planted sunflowers, saying Grandpa would have liked them. But the uncertainty sat on my chest like a brick I couldn't shake off. A week later, I got another letter. This time it had a return address. It was from my mom. I opened it outside, alone. Tyler, if you're reading this, I know you've probably seen the picture. And I know you're hurt. You have every right to be. But before you hate me, please understand, I didn't go to him. He came to me. He told me he was dying. Liver failure. Said he had no one else. I didn't believe him at first. But then I saw it with my own eyes. He's not the same man. He's thinner, slower, weaker. I thought maybe I could help him find peace before the end. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I'm a fool. But I wanted to try. Not for him. For me. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just didn't want you to find out from someone else. You saved those kids. You built a life. And no matter what, I will always be proud of you. Love. Mom. I read the letter 3 times. It didn't fix anything, but it explained some of it. I showed it to Daniel. He read it quietly, folded it once, and set it down on the table. Some people spend their whole lives trying to make up for what they've done, he said. And some just run from it. Sounds like she's trying, at least. I didn't know what to think. Part of me wanted to see her again. To ask her face to face why she chose to help the man who ruined so much of our lives. Another part of me wanted to shut the door and never look back. But that wasn't the end of it. A few days later, Lisa called me again. You need to come by the courthouse, she said. There's something I think you should see. When I arrived, she handed me a folder. Inside was a new will signed by my grandfather and notarized just a month before his death. And in it was a clause I hadn't seen before. Should anything happen to my grandson Tyler, or should he be found unfit to manage the property, legal ownership will pass to his mother, Angela. My hands went cold. Daniel looked over my shoulder and muttered, that explains a few things. It wasn't just about my dad coming back, or my mom being with him. If I messed up, if something went wrong, everything I'd built could legally be taken away. It all made sense now. The photos, the threats, the sudden reappearance. They weren't trying to scare me. They were trying to push me into reacting, into losing control, into proving I wasn't stable enough to handle this life. It wasn't just revenge. It was a setup. I couldn't sleep the night I read the second will. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing in every direction. If something happened to me, or if I so much as stumbled, the property, the life we'd rebuilt, would be legally passed to the one person I didn't know if I could trust anymore, my mother. That clause didn't come out of nowhere. Someone had added it. Someone had influenced it. And deep down, I had a sinking feeling who that someone might be. The next morning, I told Daniel I needed to go see her. He didn't try to talk me out of it. He just handed me a full tank of gas, a to-go coffee, and said, keep your head clear. Don't give them what they want. I drove 2 hours to a rundown neighborhood near the edge of town. The address came from a note Lisa had slipped me quietly, off the record. I pulled up to a sagging one-story house with a crooked mailbox and peeling paint. A tired-looking pickup sat in the driveway. She answered the door like she'd been expecting me. Tyler, she said, voice calm. Come in. I stepped inside. The place smelled like old curtains and cold coffee. She'd aged. Her hair was grayer, and her eyes looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. We sat at a wobbly kitchen table. She poured me coffee without asking. I didn't touch it. I know why you're here, she said. Then you know I need answers, I said. Real ones. No more letters. She nodded, looking down at her hands. I didn't ask your grandfather to add that clause. But I didn't stop him either. He thought it would protect you. From what? She looked up. From yourself. That hit me like a punch. What does that mean? She sighed. He knew how hard your life had been. The anger. The weight you carried. He was proud of you, but he worried you were carrying too much alone. He wanted a backup plan. That backup plan was you? I asked, almost laughing. You, who left us with him for years. Her eyes welled up. I didn't leave you. I lost myself. And when I finally tried to come back, you didn't need me anymore. I shook my head. It's not about need. It's about trust. Then I leaned in. You're living with him again, aren't you? She didn't answer. I stood up. This was never about helping him die in peace. You're trying to get the house. The land. Everything. No, she said quickly, standing too. Tyler, listen to me, he's sick. Really sick. He has maybe months. And he told me he wanted to make things right. I stared at her. Does that include contesting the will again? Getting custody of Evan? Manipulating me into losing control so I look unfit? She didn't deny it. That was all I needed to know. I'm done, I said. Don't come near the farm. Don't contact the kids. If you really want to make things right, walk away. She looked like she wanted to say more. But I turned and walked out the door, closing it behind me. On the drive back, I stopped at a gas station to clear my head. That's when I saw him. My father. Sitting alone on a bench near the side of the building, hunched over, a cigarette in hand. He looked thinner, like she'd said. Weaker. But his eyes still had that same cold shine. He saw me. Smiled. You came all this way just to visit the old man? I said nothing. He stood slowly, taking a drag. You think you've won, don't you? I stepped closer. I didn't win anything. I survived you. He chuckled. Survived? No, son. You became me. Look at you. Angry. Paranoid. Always waiting for someone to betray you. I clenched my fists, but didn't move. He noticed. There it is, he said. That fire. You've always had it. Then he leaned in just slightly. All I have to do is wait. You'll lose it. You'll snap. And when you do, the court will come running. That was it. That was the whole game. He wasn't trying to fight me legally. He was trying to provoke me emotionally. So I did the last thing he expected. I smiled. You don't matter anymore, I said. You're just a shadow. And shadows disappear when the sun comes up. Then I walked away. When I got back home, I called Lisa and asked her to help me file a legal amendment to the will. One that removed my mom as backup beneficiary and named Daniel instead. It wasn't easy. It involved proving my mother's ties to a man with an open file for abuse and manipulation. But the detective helped. So did the evidence from the barn. Within a month, it was official. If anything ever happened to me, Daniel would become the legal guardian of the kids, and the property would remain in the family, our real family. That night, I told Evan the news. So he can't take the house? He asked. I shook my head. Not anymore. He smiled and hugged me. Good. Things slowly returned to normal after that. The sunflowers bloomed. Hannah got accepted into a local art program. Lacey won first place in her school science fair. Evan learned how to mow the field without stalling the engine. And I slept better. Not because everything was perfect, but because we'd survived the storm. We'd fought back together. Life didn't magically turn perfect once the paperwork was signed and the threat stopped. There were still tough days. Bills to juggle, meals to stretch, nights where the memories hit harder than expected. But they were our days now. Not controlled by fear. Not haunted by yelling behind closed doors. Just real, ordinary days. And that's what made them beautiful. We got into a rhythm. School in the mornings. I'd head to work at the shop or take a class at the college in the afternoon. Evenings were for dinner around the table, where everyone had to say one good thing and one bad thing from their day, Daniel's rule, not mine. Evan's nightmares started fading. Hannah's laugh got louder. Lacey became obsessed with turning the barn loft into a mini art studio. And me? I started smiling more. I didn't realize how long it had been since I'd felt light, free of that constant weight pressing down. For the first time since I was a kid, I could look out over the fields and feel hope. Daniel thrived too. He never once tried to replace our dad, but somehow he became more of a father than I ever thought I'd get. He taught Evan how to change spark plugs, helped Hannah hang her paintings in the hallway like it was a gallery, listened to Lacey talk for 30 straight minutes about the science behind bee colonies. And with me, he was just there. Solid, steady, quietly proud. One evening, we sat on the porch watching the sky turn orange over the fields. He handed me a cold bottle of root beer and said, "Your grandfather would be proud. You built something here. Something that matters." I looked out at the old barn, the fading sunflowers, the house full of noise and love and second chances. "Yeah," I said. "I think he would." A month later, we got one last surprise. A letter arrived in the mailbox. No name, just a postmark from 2 towns over. Inside was a single sheet of paper in familiar, careful handwriting. It was from my mom. She wrote, "I've moved. I'm not with him anymore. He's gone. I didn't attend the funeral. I couldn't. I'm starting over somewhere small, somewhere quiet. I won't come back unless you ask me to. But I want you to know, I'm clean. I'm safe. And I'm proud of you. Tell the kids they can write to me if they ever want to. Love. Mom." I sat with that letter for a long time. No anger. No excuses. Just truth. Finally. I didn't know what to do with it at first. Part of me wanted to shred it. Another part wanted to drive out and find her. In the end, I gave it to the kids. They each read it silently. Then Lacey said, "I think I'm going to write her." And just like that, we started healing in a new way. Not by erasing the past, but by accepting it and choosing what to carry forward. Now, over a year later, the farm is thriving. The garden out back feeds more than just us. The barn hosts weekend workshops where Daniel teaches kids how to fix bikes and engines. We even built a tiny studio for Hannah and Lacey to share a half-art, half-science experiment zone. Evan? He's doing great. Has a group of friends. Even asked if he could get a dog, which turned into a family debate that ended in us rescuing a mutt named Rusty. Best decision we ever made. As for me, I still work at the shop, still take classes. But now, I'm studying child advocacy. I want to help other kids who were in the same spot I was, confused, scared, unheard. Because if it weren't for the people who stepped up, I wouldn't be here. Daniel, Lisa, Grandpa, even Mom, in her own imperfect way. They all helped me find the way back to something that felt like home. Sometimes, I walk out to the edge of the field, where the sunflowers grow wild and tall. I stand there and look back at the house, the creaky floors, the peeling porch, the wind chimes rattling in the breeze. And I feel it. Peace. Not the kind that comes from everything being perfect, but the kind you fight for. The kind that's earned. We didn't come from much, but we built something better. Together.